We can. I always resent it when people will write articles. I understand it because I think they do it from not an understanding of what economics and freedom is all about. But they'll say, oh, Ron Paul wants to go back to the 19th century and go back and you know, something old and ancient. But let me tell you what's old and ancient. That's tyranny. That's been around way too long. Most of the world has been run by tyrants. Most of the world today is being run by tyrants, and this is quite a bit different. So the experiment that we've had worked very well, but then we got careless. I believe we got careless because we were tempted by the material abundance. So we have freedom, and we have the incentive. We have a good system. It produces tremendous wealth, and then we concentrate on the material abundance, and we don't think about where the material abundance comes from, and think that, you know, that you can spend forever. Sometimes people who inherit a lot of money, or some people who are successful and get millions and millions of dollars, but they don't understand where it came from. They can get careless and they lose it all. I think we as a nation tended to do that we concentrate on that. And what did that invite? It invited business people more to invest more money in lobbyists than in R&D and developing new products and being competitive around the world, because they went to Washington and they took over. So in understanding that, we can challenge all this, but we have to convince people that it is in their best interest. They may not think about this deeply, but they know superficially that we have to, it has to be in their best interest. And right now the people are saying that the programs that we have in Washington, the spending is not in their best interest. It's dangerous. And they have now come to the conclusion, although it's been a long struggle to convince the majority of the American people, it is not in our best interest to be involved in endless wars that have been undeclared or unwinnable, and they ought to end. The opportunity right now that we have, it's expressed in this campaign. We don't know how much time it will be before we go over the cliff and really cause a great deal of political problems for ourselves. It could be in 6 months, it could be in 6 years. I think it's moving along rather rapidly, but we see it happening around the world already. I mean, take a country like Greece. They know that they went way too far and they have to cut back. When they cut back, people have been taught for so long to be totally independent. They get very angry. There's demonstrations in the streets and they will become violent. So this is the reason that we have to head it off before we get to that point. And also the fact that that is a danger makes me very much concerned about the undermining of our civil liberties and our due process of law in this country. This is very dangerous. When people are fearful either from an enemy that people describe, even if it's pretend, just think of all the fear-mongering that occurred and why we had to go to war against Iraq because they were about to attack us with a nuclear weapon and Al-Qaeda was there. None of that was true. It was at 9/11 was used as an excuse to do something they wanted to have done for many, many years. And of course, even here at home, there had been people proposing certain types of legislation that would invade our privacy, undermine the Fourth Amendment, and they couldn't get it passed. But guess what? 9/11 came and passed quickly. 2 weeks later, called the Patriot Act. The one thing that the Patriot Act is not, it is not patriotic. Matter of fact, the only thing that we should do about the Patriot Act is repeal it. That's what we When that bill was on the floor, we had, even though the bill had been floating around, the final version arrived at the floor in the aftermath of 9/11, and our debate, it was just, sort of automatic. the congressman that was sitting next to me, he was voting for it. And I said, why are you voting for this? You don't even know what's in it. He says, I know. I said, there could be some bad stuff in there, don't you know? He said, yeah, I know that. And I said, well, why don't you vote against it? He says, how can I vote against the Patriot Act and go back home and explain it to my constituents? I said, well, that's what your job is, to go home and explain it to them. Notice, but the one thing that if you look at the name of a bill that comes out of Congress, you can almost always assume it's opposite of what the title tells you it's going to do. A little bit of deceptions there. So can you imagine if they had only called it repeal the Fourth Amendment Act, how many people would have voted for it? So when we make the bill to repeal the Patriot Act, we should call it Restore the Fourth Amendment Act. This has deeply undermined our privacy. There's no doubt about it, because that was a major issue for the founders and then after the Revolution to put that in, because it was the British involvement of going into the houses and looking at the papers and looking for whether or not they bought their stamps and paid their taxes, but they would come in and they'd stay in their houses, no search warrants, and just total abuse. But this is what's happening to us in America. Today, whether it's a combination of the drug war or the combination of the Patriot Act or the atmosphere, the houses are being broken into rather routinely. And at all levels of government, we have these SWAT teams going in, and unfortunately, many times they're going in and they're going to try to find out if somebody's using an illegal drug. And they go in there and people die. They don't even show the search warrant because they don't get them, and they get to write them. The person breaking into the houses get to write their own search warrants. This was the kind of thing that we had a revolution about. And it's also, this particular act is what allows the ruthlessness of how we're treated at airports. If we stand by and say that we can have elderly people undressed and children molested and X-rayed top to bottom, and certain people run through the X-ray 2 or 3 times. Tell you, if we can look at those X-rays on TV and say, oh, well, I guess we have to give up a little bit of our liberty to be safe, then there's something wrong with this and we need to change. You know, about a year ago, the president sent somebody over to testify before a Senate hearing and explained a new position he held. And he said that he has this authority because it's not prohibited by the Constitution. So he buys in, the president buys in this argument that if it's not prohibited by the Constitution, he's allowed to do anything he wants. But it's written the other way. The only thing the president is allowed to do are those things that he is given explicit permission to do. When he came to announce, to tell the people, and there was not much of an outcry by the American people, but he said that it is now an official policy of the United States that he can direct the assassination of an American citizen. No charges made, no trial, maybe a bad person. You know, bad people are supposed to have trials too, so that if we ever get accused of anything, that we get a trial. Everybody deserves a trial. Even Timothy McVeigh, these people get trials. But to prove his point, he has now assassinated 3 American citizens. And one happened to be the 16-year-old son of a guy that was accused, not, you know, at least thought to be a pretty bad guy. But a 16-year-old kid out barbecuing in his backyard. He was an ally of the father, so to speak. But that is not what made America great. That's not why we were the freest and the most prosperous country in the world. And those kind of things can't stand. But even the Congress doesn't help much at all. The president assumes these powers, but the Congress delivered more powers to him on a platter, and the president thought that's the way he would break in the new year. It was on New Year's Day that he signed the National Defense Authorization Act. This means that he's repealing the posse comitatus, that he has said that Americans can be arrested not by the local policeman that's supposed to be in charge of that, or the local sheriff, but the army, the military can come in and make arrests. That was one of the main reasons why there was a revolution between the Texans and the Mexico, because that's what they started doing, and the Texans didn't like that. And we shouldn't like it either if our government's going to arrest American citizens by the military. What do they do after they arrest him? Do they take him and give him a trial? No. They're denied a trial. They're denied an attorney. And they can be put in a secret prison, and they can be sent out of the country to a secret prison. Well, have they done it very often? We don't know how many times. They have done it a few times. But it's the process, it's the standard is so important. So if a country gets into chaos, they say, well, that's the law of the land. There was one provision put in that bill that was even more atrocious. But that provision said that if you were arrested and you were charged and you were tried and found innocent, if the federal government decided that they still wanted to arrest you again and put you in prison for life in a secret prison, they still could do it even if you were found to be innocent by a jury. Now, that was in the bill, but there was a young senator from Kentucky who was able... He had heard about that at the last minute because they sort of try to slide these things down. He ran down to the Senate floor and insisted a vote came out on this. And he won the vote. A lot of people who were supporting the bill, they said, well, we didn't know it was in there. They probably didn't know it was in there. That's the tragedy of all that goes on in Washington. So much gets put in. They get put in conferences. They get put in by staff people, and it's very difficult. This is why I generally have stayed out of trouble in Washington, because not that I knew everything in a bill, it's just that I had a strong sense of suspicion about them, that if I found one little thing wrong, the safest vote then, if you were suspicious of it, the vote was no. We have these economic problems, and free markets could settle those. A sound monetary system could solve our monetary problems. And a healthy respect for civil liberties, understanding where our lives and our liberties come from, and all in the Constitution, having constitutionalists, that would solve that problem. And also, if we had a constitutional foreign policy of a strong national defense, at the same time not believing that we should be the policemen of the world, and then believing in occupation, and this would, essentially solve our problems. Not a perfect world, but we're moving in the wrong direction right now. But for me, the issue is this individual liberty, how freedom for the individual brings people together, and it's something that happened at the same time 100 years ago. Our country sort of lost this concept of freedom being one unit. Economic freedom and social and individual freedom on how we want to run our lives, the right of our to have our own religious values and personal values. And so some groups would defend one half of it and other groups would defend the other half. But it's all one. If it's your life and you own your life and it's your liberty and it should be your property, then freedom should bring us all together. Now, the big problem there is that some people waste their lives. And some people waste their lives in a social sense. And some people waste their lives in an economic sense. And then the do-gooders who like power use that as an excuse for saying, well, he won't take care. And I've had members of Congress tell me this. Well, I said, why are you voting for this? He says, well, the people are too stupid. They won't take care of themselves. So he had to vote to, have another program. But this is the whole thing. If we can put this all together, what happens is that people have to assume responsibility. Now, freedom doesn't work if you don't assume responsibility for your behavior. But up this notion that we are totally intolerant of other people, how they use their liberties. We generally aren't intolerant of how people use their religious liberties. We let people go to different churches, and if they don't want to go to church, they don't go to church, and we're fairly tolerant of that. But as soon as it comes to other personal habits, and for one group, it'll be personal habits, the other group on economic matters, then they feel compelled that we have to take care of people. We have to be the nanny state. And it never ends. Once we make this assumption that the government can protect us against ourselves, there is no liberty left. The government is endless in taking away our liberty. But what is so nice about this, if we can be more tolerant of other people, it doesn't mean that we endorse what they do. And some people think that if you legalize something, if you legalize choice in religion, you don't endorse somebody else's religion. If we don't endorse what you read and study intellectually, why is it if somebody is so overwhelmingly being controlled about what we put into our bodies? And you know, just today, I complain about all the things that control. They shouldn't have control over our bodies. You should have control over your bodies. Just today, I think I read it on the internet, another Amish farmer. He came in and had all his property destroyed and taken from him, from the federal government, because he had the audacity to think that he had the right to sell raw milk to his neighbors. I mean, what is going on here? But it's the principle that has to be looked at. If you say, well, we have to have a little bit of control here, a little bit of control here, then you lose control, because then the government assumes that they control everything. But these ideas are coming around, and people are understanding them. They are our solutions. And the one part about bringing people together under the issue of liberty, it all of a sudden erases the differences among us. It erases, it brings people diverse, who are diverse, bring people together, because we shouldn't be challenging each other. But the one thing that has to be done if we're going to protect liberty, in our history we certainly have had, and we still have remnants of it, of people being attacked and they lose their liberties because they belong to certain groups. Even today, the way the drug laws are being enforced, certain groups get much more punished than other groups on these drug laws, and that, as far as I'm concerned, is wrong. But at the same time, you should... same time, if you shouldn't be punished you shouldn't be punished because you belong to a group, you shouldn't have any special benefits because you belong to a special group. So the solution comes in understanding these principles, and they're not brand new. They've been around. There is a stronger understanding today of the need for this. There's every reason to be encouraged because of the numbers that are growing and the enthusiasm, and the need for this today is bringing more and more people over to our side. So all I could say is that if we continue to do this, the world will change, this country will change, your life will change. You will have a greater obligation because you have come to a fuller understanding than many, many others out there. So your obligations will be to participate in one way or the other. We hope you participate in this caucus votes and political, but some people don't like that. Sometimes they're teachers, sometimes they get in the media. Who knows? Maybe helping candidates, but you always have a responsibility. And it's not because you have to donate yourself or sacrifice yourself. This is one time it's okay to do it in your own self-interest. You do this because it's in your interest to live in a free society. It's in your interest to have your family live in a free society. I want to thank you very much for coming out, and if we do our job, we can continue this effort, we can continue this revolution. The revolution, which is an ideological revolution, is alive and well, and I thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this revolution.